All right, folks, thank you very much for watching this video. And I just want to say, I've been meaning to shoot this video for years. And just a little bit of history about why I feel this video is very important. I've been teaching roughly since 2014, where I started off working at University of Maryland, University College, and I was teaching in their human resource department. Well, the bachelor's degree for the human resource department, which is what I was teaching in, is very heavily academic paper focused. And as a result of which, what's happened is that I would have students who would have to write papers for my class. And, for the most part, when you had students who had to write papers for the class, it gave me kind of a different perspective on things because, as a student, you sit there and you pour your heart out into a paper and you send it off to the teacher and you get your grade back. And sometimes that grade's not always what you want it to be. And sometimes it can really hurt your feelings. And you're kind of like, well, I don't understand what happened. I actually went back and I looked at some of my old papers after I had, taken this special course in how to build a good paper. And I began to realize a lot of the mistakes that I was making. And my goal in this video is really to kind of give you an idea as a good structure for how to write a good paper and also a good process of how to develop it. I think one of the things that a lot of students tend to do is they feel that the best way to write a paper is just to put pen to paper and start writing and writing. And what they don't understand is that it stops seeming more like written communication, starts seeming more like verbal communication. Verbal communication is something that usually continues on and on and on and on until we satiate a point. Okay. Sometimes we say things that and again, how many times have we all said something that we're kind of like, boy, I really wish I could have said that differently. Okay. Not that you're saying stuff that insults people, but sometimes you say things and people don't understand it. Now, verbal communication has its benefits because as I'm looking at everybody's reaction, as I'm looking at everybody's, how they're, responding to what I'm saying, I can change my message and I can make sure that I'm kind of getting them in. And so that's one reason why if you're ever having something beyond an FYI, something beyond a cursory question, sometimes, email is not necessarily the best way to go. And that's why, like I said, verbal communication is usually a lot richer. That said, with academic paperwork, we don't always have time to do that. First of all, you're not going to have a chance to do presentations all the time. And second of all, you're going to have to learn how to write. All right. Now, more so to a criticism that I've heard in my 690 class, but I've also heard this in some of my other coursework here at George Mason. Sometimes people will say, look, I'm in an accounting program. I'm not here to write papers. I'm here to do debits and credits. Well, here's the thing, folks. Number one, you have to learn how to effectively communicate. And if you can't effectively communicate, I don't care if it's in a business sense or if it's an academic sense or if it's just in general life, you're going to have a very hard time. All right. There's times where you have incredibly brilliant people who are very smart about things like the tax code, accounting regulations, and things of that nature, but they can't communicate that with the general public. And as a result of which, there's a lot of people who kind of scratch their heads and they say, okay, yeah, well, you say you're smart. I don't see it. Okay. In other words, if you can't communicate what your intelligence is, it's not going to work out well for you. Second of all, and I would say this specifically to my master's students, you are here taking this class not because you want to be a better accountant. I mean, some of you might be thinking that's why you're here. But I would argue, and again, this is my personal opinion. It's not the personal opinion. It's not the opinion of George Mason or UMUC. Well, actually, now it's UMGC because it's University of Maryland Global Campus. But the main reason why people go into a Master's of Accounting program is that you are going to be a manager at some point. And yes, you have to have higher level skills. And of course, if you're in the Master's of Accounting program and you're starting out, you're going to get those skills. But more importantly, you also need to be prepared to lead people. And if there's one thing that I've personally found frustrating, in the accounting industry, just as a general point, is that there's a lot of people who get to the position, they have the title manager, and they don't like people, or they can't manage people, and they can't understand why people do the things that they do. Okay. If you're going to take the position of leader or manager, including the extra pay that goes with it, you better know how to manage people. Okay. And so part of the reason why we're doing some of the skills that we do in these courses, particularly in 690, is to get you ready for that leadership, is to get you ready for that organizational management so that you can effectively lead people better, help your people become better, and as a result of which, they're going to want to stick around. I would say that I talk to a lot of people who are friends of mine who are leaving the firm for one reason or another. And usually when I talk to people about why is it you're leaving the firm, I don't think my leadership cares about me. They don't care about my development. All they want me to do is churn out tax returns and then go away. You have to have that mentorship, sort of, personal development that's going to happen there. And I don't care if you're one of these rough and tumble type of guys who's like, well, I don't have feelings, all the way down to, well, you want to mother everyone. All right. Whether you have those different types of personality traits, you got to be able to provide some semblance to your people that, number one, that you can lead them effectively, but also, get the organizational goals done. And in a sense that you also want them to be able to be communicated the ideas that you want them to do. And if you can't communicate very well, it's not going to work out well for you. All right. So that's my soapbox. That's kind of the reason why we're doing this. Like I said, I've been meaning to do this video for a long time because as a professor and as I've graded more and more papers, you're writing one paper. I'm grading about 150. Okay. And it gets increasingly frustrating and usually it's about paper 30. Like I said, out of 150 papers, or actually 150, 120, 200 papers, doesn't matter how many papers I'm grading. Usually after about reading 30 papers where I can't find the structure done right, I can't find, I can't understand what is it you're trying to get to? What are your premises? What are your points? Why am I reading this? And dear God, help me if you have a boring introduction. Okay. Where I'm kind of like, okay. Again, usually it's about paper 30 that I start going, I just want to be done with this. And at that point, I have to stop grading, and then I have to, go away for a while, come back, do another 30. And then, it just takes more and more and more time. All right. If we structure papers correctly, I should have no guesswork. I should know exactly why what's the purpose of your paper? How are you going to prove to me the purpose of your paper is correct? And what's the support that you've got to go with it? That's pretty much what I need to know. And it also doesn't help to have a pretty darn good, interesting introduction. Okay. That's what we're trying to kind of get at here. And so, again, the way that I'm going to do this is that I'm going to share with you guys the outline that I'm going to recommend. Now, if some of you guys are like, look, I've been writing academic papers my entire life. I've usually gotten A's on everything. I don't feel like I have a problem. You can do your own method. All right. All I'm saying is, and generally, if you're getting those A's, you probably incorporate a lot of this already as it is. And by the way, I've had some criticism in the past that some people felt that the way that I was doing things constricted them too much. Okay, well, fine. Don't do it. Again, I would probably say at your own risk because, again, if I can't understand what your theme is, if I can't understand what your premises are, if I can't understand how you're supporting this article, I'm going to kind of go, okay, so what? Okay. And so that's kind of why we're going to do this. Like I said, I'm going to share with you guys an outline of a paper. I'm going to share with you guys the outline structure that I recommend. I'm also going to share with you guys an outline of a paper that I wrote for another class. Now, mind you, at the time of shooting this video, which is in January of 2023, I am currently registered for my second course at George Mason as a student in the Department of Philosophy. I am taking 303, which is, it's basically, I think it's basically Renaissance era philosophers through till modern, I believe. I don't know how far he's going to go. We haven't gotten the syllabus yet. But last semester I took ancient civilization. And so I ended up having to write a few papers. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you the outline that I did with my other papers. And then I'm going to share with you the paper that I ended up writing using that outline. And then another thing that I'm going to end up doing here, and I hope I have, you know, as we're going down, we'll probably put it in where it belongs. I'm also going to take you to the Owl Purdue website where we can kind of share with you, you know, basically the, you know, the website that I always like to go to when I'm writing academic papers. Okay. So, you know, again, that's kind of the core structure that we're going to be doing with this. I hope you find it informative. And if you don't, feel free to send me an email. If you're one of my students, you'll know how to get in touch with me. If you're not one of my students, feel free to leave a comment in the comment box below. If you're not one of my students, I'll ask you to like and subscribe also, because obviously we want to be able to promulgate the message and get it out to more and more people. So without further ado, I'm going to get you over to the... All right, folks, so as you're taking a look at this, you're seeing, you know, basically it's just a Word document. And by the way, this Word document is pretty much, I just copy and paste this into Blackboard so that you guys have a copy of this. And then you can, or sometimes I do just do the Word document itself. With this, I don't have a problem putting the Word document. But again, you kind of utilizing this. Now, one of the things when I was a high school student, I used to have I used to take Air Force Junior ROTC. So I was, you know, and basically the way that the course was run, you had a colonel who would teach you aerospace education. You had a chief that would teach you more leadership skills and communications and things of that nature. And so this was a major topic of his. And one of the things that he would always say, he said, look, you know, in the Air Force, we always learned it this way. Tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. And that's usually the structure of any academic paper that you're going to have. You're going to tell me what you're going to say, then you're going to tell me, and then when you get to the conclusion, you're going to say, this is what I just got done saying. Okay? It sounds repetitive, and it sounds like, why am I wasting my time adding all this extra fluff? You're not adding fluff. Okay, again, you're bringing me into the subject. You're bringing me into the topic. And then once you get me into that topic, you're leading me along the way so that you can kind of say, see, there it is. See, there it is. See, there it is. And then when we get to the end, we're kind of like, okay, guys, we're wrapping up. You know, it's like on an airplane. Okay, we're getting ready to descend down into Dulles International Airport. The temperature is 45 degrees. I want you to have your trays up in locked position and your seat in the upright position as we're getting ready to land. And make sure to fasten your seatbelts. And oh, by the way, we also have a nice credit card offer for you to go ahead and get it, where you can get an additional 60,000 bonus point. Boy, if you can you tell I've done a lot of flying in life. But that's kind of what ends up happening here. Okay. But that's what ends up kind of happening here when we have to deal with that. Okay, so again, your intro is basically where you're going to tell me what you're going to tell me. Okay. Now this area here, your premises, I would actually argue your theme all the way down to your last premise is where you're telling me. So again, tell me what you're going to tell me is the intro. Tell me is your theme all the way down to premise number 7. And then your conclusion is going to be, what did you just get done telling me? Okay. That's all this is. Again, it's not rocket science. Okay. And any paper that I write, it's always done this way. Okay. Ever since I did my doctoral work. And by the way, like I said, I never felt like I was very good at writing academic papers, really, until I got to my doctoral program. And they actually hired writing coaches. And it's not they hired writing coaches because we're all stupid. The reason why they hired writing coaches is that the program that I was in, the ELP class, basically what had happened is most people who got into in order to get into the ELP class, you had to have roughly between 10 to 20 years of professional experience, with some of it at the higher levels. And so because I had worked on an admiral staff, I qualified for this program. But there were people who, you know, were heads of industry. We had 3 people who ran their own company. We had, one person who was a strategic person on, in the Marine Corps type stuff. And so those people had gotten so used to writing in their business settings that they didn't know how to write academically anymore. And so as a result of which, they hired writing coaches to kind of get us to this point. And my writing coach and one of my instructors gave me this thing that you're looking at here, where they said, look, here's your intro, you got your premise, and then you got your conclusions. And so that's what's with that. And over time, I've kind of morphed this a bit. The one they gave me was a little bit simpler than this, but I went ahead and I've morphed this a bit. All right, so in your intro, they say the first 2 to 4 sentences you want to be snappy. Now, I usually bust past that 4-sentence limit. That's just me. But I actually always get comments from my teachers when they read papers that I've written, and they're like, "Holy smokes, your intros are like so interesting." Because I'm always citing movies, I'm always citing stories, books that I've read, fascinating anecdotes or whatever. And the goal is to sort of wake the person up, get the person interested. Oh, wow, I really want to read this. Again, the professor who's grading your paper has to grade 150 of these. Give them something interesting to read. Okay, that's, and I'm not asking for that me as a personal favor to me. I'm asking it as a personal favor to you, because if you give me something interesting to read, inadvertently, well, not inadvertently, but I would say just historically, people usually have gotten better grades if they have better written papers. And so part of that better writing paper is wake me up. That, like that song, wake me up inside, and all that stuff. Okay. I need you to wake me up. Okay. So this is kind of important to me. And then what's going to happen with your intro? Once you've gotten your intro, you're going to tie it together, and then you're going to take each one of these premises and you're going to copy them up. Now let's talk a little bit about what a premise is before we move forward, because when I first heard this term, I was like, I'd heard the term premise, but I didn't really know what one was. All right. So what is a premise? Think of a premise like this. The theme of your paper is your argument. What are you trying to get me to, what are you trying to prove to me? What are you trying to show me? What are you trying to tell me? What question are you trying to answer? Whatever that is. Okay. In order for this theme to be true, premise number 1 must be true. Premise number 2 must be true. Premise number 3 must be true. Premise number 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, how many ever premises you have, must be true. So in order for me to prove this, I have to prove these 3 things. Okay. And if you think about it, the theme is kind of just this overarching, what are you trying to write this paper for? All right. And so premises, another way I've heard of it before, it's sub-themes. I'm not sure I'd rather go that far. I think sub-theme is a little, it's almost like this has to be a component of that. And that's not true. What I'm saying is that for the theme itself, in order for this theme to, with these premises, in order for these premises, in order for the theme to be true, the premises have to be true also. Now, here's the thing. When you write your premises down here, you're going to provide support as to what's going to cause the premises to be true. Okay. Now, again, academic writing, I would probably say about 80% of what you write academically should not be your own words. It should be words from somebody else. And you're trying to synthesize their thoughts, their emotions, their ideas into a new idea that you've kind of created, saying, look, because this is true, this is true, this is true, this is true, this also, more likely than not, is true. Okay, and I shouldn't say just more likely than not, because then it sounds like it's more than 50%. But, if I can prove that premise 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever is true, then if these are all true, then the theme is true because they're all linked together. And you'll kind of see how that works when I talk to you about the example outline that's going to be going on. All right. So again, the way that this gets done, you write your intro first, your snappy intro, wake me up. Premise number 1, which is, you're going to have premise number 1, which is, and again, when you're bringing these premise up, exact copies. Okay, exact copies. Why is it important to do an exact copy? That way, when you're telling me what you're going to tell me, you really are telling me what you're going to tell me. Okay, and I'll show you how that works when we get to the example outline later on. But again, premise number 1, premise number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, and all that sort of stuff needs to be, written here, exact copy, exact copy, exact copy. Now, the last sentence of your intro paragraph or your intro section is going to be the theme of your paper. Now, let's talk about that for a moment. I, in my philosophy classes, was told by my professors, don't put your theme as the last sentence here. You want your theme to be the sentence like here. Okay, what they're suggesting is that you put your theme here. Okay, so as you put your theme here, that's where they want the theme to be. And then this one right here, would basically not be there. Usually they'd have a way to strike through. But anyways, again, whatever your professors ask you to do, just do it. You can take this outline and modify it to their needs. You're not going to hurt my feelings. And there's no copyright on this, folks. I'm not, I hereby solemnly declare that there is no copyright on any of this stuff that I'm writing right now. Okay. Other than, the use of the videos that I've purchased in order to do this, blah, 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 so on and so forth. But that doesn't matter. Whoops. Let me see if I can get that. Okay. So again, if they want to put, I always say put the theme as the last sentence of this paragraph. You can put it as the sentence before this. And sometimes when I'm grading papers, in the old days when I used to grade papers, and by the way, when I used to get papers from University of Maryland, University College or whatever, I would physically print them out and write on them so that I could make notes to myself as to what grade this person deserved and blah, 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 so on and so forth. All right. So that's kind of important in that sense. All right. So that gets you through your intro. As a part of this paper writing, you may need to do some additional background information. And I'll kind of show you an example of that in my assignment that I did. I did something a little unusual in this assignment that I did for philosophy was, they call it W3. So they had W1, W2, W3, which is writing assignment 1, writing assignment 2, writing assignment 3. Again, they're like accounts. We're not entirely creative. We kind of repeat what wash, rinse, and repeat. Okay. So W3, I had to classify a philosopher in a different group than what would be normally done. So you can do the same thing. But again, if you have to kind of do some changes to that, you can break this out into like a background paragraph that says, look, for example, if you're writing for my 690 class, you could say, look, I understand that Jones is usually seen as a rational theorist. But there's certain aspects of him that are sense-making, theoretically speaking, more like sense-making. And I'm going to go ahead and argue that from this point. Now, if you're going to do something like that, Jones is is considered one of the steadfast rationalists. I would probably go, you better have some evidence to that. You better have a reason why that's a stretch for me in that sense. But again, in my paper where I moved Heraclitus from pre-Socrates to Socrates, the reason why was because some of what Heraclitus did, Socrates was actually incorporating some of his stuff. And so I was saying, look, because the item that we're talking about here, Socrates incorporated Heraclitus's stuff, I'm moving him into this group for the purposes of this discussion. That's kind of how I ended up doing it. But like I said, if you have to do something that's going to be sort of out of the ordinary, you might want to go ahead and do that here. Okay. And then any definitions. If there's a word that you're using that's going to be, you can have a word that is not common to the class and say, when I talk about this is what I mean. You could also have a word that has several meanings. So first of all, what is sense making? Sense making has actually multiple definitions. Okay, it's not just one definition. Now there's Carl Weick's definition, and then there's other people's definition of what they feel sense making is. Now, oftentimes they'll go back to Weick's version. So again, if you're going to use a non-Weick version of sense making as the definition, I would probably say you'd want to put that in a definitions paragraph. Okay. But that's kind of what ends up happening. And again, these paragraphs, I mean, they're as long as they need to be. Academically speaking, I almost never see them more than like 3 or 4 or 5 sentences. That's, minus the intro sentence and the conclusion sentence to that and the transition sentence. We're talking like meat part of this is no more than like 3 to 5. Again, if you're redefining the entire dictionary at this point, you might want to say, okay, here's Appendix A with all my definitions in it, and you can do it that way too. Again, if you're talking about, half a dozen definitions and no more, a definitions paragraph will probably suffice. Anything above and beyond that, I probably wouldn't have it as a paragraph. I'd say, look, in Appendix 1, I've gone ahead and I've outlined some definitions as to how I'm going to define things in this paper, blah, blah, blah. So you're not taking too much away from this. Again, you've told me what you're going to tell me. So get on with it. Okay, don't use these 2 paragraphs to delay the message too much. Okay, or I'm going to lose interest and I'm going to be like, oh. Okay, you don't want that to happen. Okay, you don't want that to happen. All right, a premise. So a premise is a statement that must be true in order for the theme to be true. A premise is a statement that must be true in order for the theme to be true. So I have to prove premise 1. Okay, I have to prove premise 2, I have to prove premise 3. Now, when I say prove, I don't necessarily mean that I have to go out and write this huge mathematical formula and, try to figure out what all this stuff is. What I'm saying when I have to prove this is I just have to give some support as to what caused this. And you'll see here I've got support, support, support. Okay. Now, sometimes you're going to want to paraphrase this, and sometimes you're going to want to direct quote it. All right. Now, you'll notice that we have this, author year page if necessary. That's your citation. Now, in this format that I've given you in this outline, this is APA formatting. And let's talk about that for a moment. Your professors that you may have in other courses that you take here are not going to ask you to do things in APA formatting. They may ask you to do things Chicago style. They may ask you to do things, Harvard Blue Book. There's a plethora of different methodologies with this. Management schools tend to, and School of Business is generally seen as more of a management school, tend to use APA more often than not. Okay. Now that doesn't mean it doesn't happen that you don't have it otherwise. I was looking at, the California for Management Review, which is not a bad journal. It's not a great journal, but it's not a bad journal. And the California Management Review was asking, I believe, for Chicago style with footnotes. Okay. So, again, you do what you need to do per what the instructions say. When I say here, author year and page if necessary, I'm just trying to make sure that you understand that, again, 80% of your paper should not be your original words unless you're paraphrasing, but you got to cite somebody. And this is a pet peeve of mine. I open up somebody's paper and they've got 15 sources that they're using. And I go to the in-text citations and they've only cited 3 times. It tells me that they're not citing where they're getting their stuff from. And then I begin to wonder, did you really cite this correctly? Okay. And we don't know. All right. So I need people to kind of jump on this a little sooner rather than later to make sure that you're doing this. And you'll kind of see how that kind of plays out here as we, like I said, when I show you the outline that I did for my paper, how I ended up doing it. Now, just a little FYI, in case I forget to tell you before we start, my paper that I wrote for my philosophy class were all Chicago. They were not APA formatting. Okay. Now, the difference between the two is minor. I wouldn't worry too much about it, and I'll kind of show to you what I mean by that when we do it. But the fact of the matter is, you should still be able to see this for what it is and be able to use it. Okay, so now let's talk about this last one. You say, I see premise, 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever. I think that after premise 1, 2, and 3, you kind of got the general gist of it. But what did I mean by this 4, 5, 6, and 7 for paper length? So if I ask you to write a paper for this class, and by the way, most of my papers, I never give a length. I only tell you there's no minimum or maximum length to this paper. However, most people who are successful are generally between 6 and 8 pages. Okay. What that means is if you go to 15 pages, it better be a darn good paper. Okay. Because it tells me that if I open it up and there's 15 pages after the title and the works cited page, that tells me that you can't get to the point. Okay. And I got concerns about, are you really doing this stuff? Now, my final my research paper that I did for this class, I didn't use that as an example because because the professor artificially shrunk she shrunk the amount of words that we could use with this, and the topic that I was writing required it was easily a large research paper. Should have been, almost maybe 150% of what I was allowed to write. And I actually had to go back to her and ask for permission for lengthening, and I didn't want to ask her again. So it wasn't very well organized, shall we? I mean, it was well organized, I thought, but when I started copy pasting and making, I got done with it, and it was like 3,000 words, and I was only allowed to be at 2,000. And she gave me permission to go to 2,500. And I was like, can I get a little more? And she was like, no. And I was like, okay, it is what it is. All right. So we ended up having to do that. But again, how you do your premises or how many premises you're going to have is going to be determined on how long you expect that paper to be. I would say roughly, just for like a rough number, if you take your page number, and again, you're math people, we're all accountants, so you guys can kind of figure this out. And if you add 25%, so for example, I've got we'll say I have an 8-page paper requirement. If I did 8 and I add 25%, 25% of 8 is 2. So I should have at least 10 premises here. Now here's the thing. As we're writing the paper, if I begin to realize I'm going to hit that 8 a lot sooner than I expected to, I can pull one of these premises out and just be done with it. And I've done that before where I've said, okay, go to 125%. Again, it's much easier for you to shrink a paper than it is for you to add. All right, because when you add, it starts adding fluff that's not really necessary to be there, and you're just kind of adding words to get to word limits. Not useful. All right, so I probably would have, upwards of about, and again, when I said, add 25%, I would say that, 8 to 10 premises are probably going to be more than enough to get to that page, especially because the way I always do it, when I tell, and again, I said, successful pages are between 6 and 8. I go with 8 as my target. And so therefore I'm going to have 10 premises, because what will happen is I'm writing the paper, I'll begin to realize, oh darn, 10 premises don't exist. So I don't need 10 premises. So I can go down to 9. So it's easier for me to kind of scale the paper that way in order to do that. So again, sort of a way that I've done this in the past is that I'll scale to 10. I mean, I'll shoot for 10, and then, like I said, I can scale back if I need to. And again, because it says 6 to 8, if I have to scale back, I'm not concerned. See what I'm saying? Now, if we went to 6, what's 25% of 6? 25% of 6 is roughly about, 1.5. So I'm probably going to add, I'll probably have 7 premises on a 6-page paper. 7, maybe 8, depending on how long the premises need to be. And something else that I want to say before we get to the conclusion portion of this, I've put down 3 supports. I think 3 is at a minimum. All right, you need at least 3, and the reason why is because you're gonna have your introductory sentence, you're gonna have your conclusion sentence, which is your transitory sentence to the next premises. And I need 3 sentences or 3 statements in between each in order to do it. Now, when we get to the process of smoothing, which we'll talk about when we get to the writing of the paper, the process of smoothing will add words. So if you have 3, you're golden. You're going to be fine. I would say 2, not enough, in my opinion. Go to 4, fine. 5, okay. 6, you may need to think about, can I break these up into two different premises? Okay. And oftentimes that'll happen. You get to 6 levels of support or 6 lines of support. They can be grouped and you can kind of say, okay, that's another premises. And so I'm just going to add that and we're going to take care of that there. Okay. Like I said, when we get to the process of smoothing, you're going to add words. And so that I wouldn't worry about that on there. Okay. Now, as you move from one paragraph to the next, you need to have what's called transitory sentences. Now, transitory sentences are sort of a conclusion sentence that's also going to lead you to the next thought. That makes it smoother, so that you know, as you're going from thought to thought to thought to thought, it's more like you're like cloud surfing as opposed to, you know, doing this thing and you're just trying, you know, you're going crazy. Okay. So that's how I would approach this if I were doing this in your case. And then your conclusion, your first sentence, this theme, word for word, done. And again, the conclusion sentence is actually going to be the easiest. The conclusion paragraph is going to be the easiest. Because what you're going to do is that you're going to say, you're going to say, in conclusion, theme. Next sentence. In order to prove this theme, I have done the following things. Or I've shown the following. Premise 1, period. I also showed premise 2, period. In addition, I also showed premise 3, period. You see what I'm saying? How we did that? And then you're going to get to the end of this. And again, you're going to add as many, premises, conclusions as you have. So if I have 10 of these, I'm going to have 10 of these sentences. Okay. You may have a rather long, conclusionary statement. Okay. The conclusion paragraph, and sometimes it doesn't hurt to break the conclusion paragraph into 2 paragraphs. And you can kind of see how to do that as you're doing that. And again, this is like an art. It's more like art, not science. I know I'm really making this, trying to make this as sciencey as possible. But again, when it comes to conclusion paragraphs, whether you should break it apart or not, again, if you're getting to a page and a half for one paragraph, probably want to break that out into multiple paragraphs. Okay. But here's, again, the conclusion paragraph, the first one is theme. Then your second sentence is going to be premise 1, exact copy. Premise 2, exact copy. Premise 3, exact copy. Premise 4, exact copy. Premise 5, exact copy. Premise 6, exact copy, and so on and so forth. And then as you get to the end, this is where you get creative in the conclusion. You're going to come up with a closing statement, again, 2 to 4 sentences, that is going to tie to your intro. And when I show you my example paper, you'll see how I do that. All right, so we've kind of taken a look at that. Let's get you over to the outline that I did for my philosophy paper W3. All right, folks. So this is going to be the outline that I did. Now, again, the theme of the paper was basically what is the understanding of ontology for philosophers from the pre-Socratics through Lucretius. Now, again, you're in an accounting program, or if you're in my accounting class, you're probably like, ontology, what's that? Okay, you just blown my brain. All right, so what is ontology? Ontology is the philosophy of existence. Okay, in other words, ontology seems to be, it is concerned with the nature of our existence. Okay, and so what I was trying to do, and again, the way that they asked us to structure this in the philosophy classes is to, and there's the GTTK method, which they have, which is, ways of developing various themes within philosophy. Again, it's a philosophy-based thing, which is why I haven't given it to you guys. And GTTX is basically Great Thinkers Toolkit is what it stands for. And, so they ask us, when you're developing your theme for our papers, you're going to have to ask a question, or you're going to have to do some kind of statement that fits into that GTTK. So I was very constricted in how I was going to do this theme. I don't want you to be. I want you to write your theme the way you want to write your theme, and that's all good. I'm not worried about that. Now, what I did, this is how I was writing my intro. Okay. Now, when I did my introduction, again, I borrowed from our Marvel Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I had to learn how to quote a movie, using Chicago style, which is interesting. And I'll show you kind of how I did that later on. But so here, what ends up happening, is like I said, I was reading the book written by Lucretius on the nature of the universe. And so you'll take a look there and you'll see that I talk about, pre-Socratics through Lucretius. Now, the pre-Socratics is basically all the philosophers that came before Socrates, and all that sort of stuff. And so, from Thales all the way through till Xenophasis. And then you have, you have the Socratics, which is, you're basically your Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, and a few others. And then you had Lucretius, and Lucretius was actually highly influenced by other Greek philosophers and things of that nature. And so I'm not going to get too much into that. But again, what I was looking for was what is the understanding of the nature of existence that started from these pre-Socratics all the way through to Lucretius. That's what my theme was. And so my snappy intro that I did was I used to watch Marvel Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. religiously. I kind of got bored of it pretty quickly after, I believe it was after like seasons 5 or 6 or whatever. I just kind of lost interest, especially when the movie started. Really, you had to go watch the movies, and just seemed to be a lot going on. What had happened was that there was this one scene where these two characters, Fitz and Simmons, who are sort of the young geniuses of the group, they get locked in a container and they get sunk to the bottom of the ocean. These guys know they're going to die. I mean, they're going to run out of oxygen after a while. They're two scientists. They're theoretical physicists type people. Sheldon Cooper. Think of Sheldon Cooper if you don't know who these guys are. If you don't know who Sheldon Cooper is, I can't help you at that point. But one of the things that I did is that they as they were at the bottom of the ocean and they thought about that they were going to die, Simmons, who's the lady of the group, turns to Fitz, who's the gentleman, and said, "What do you think it's like?" And she's referring to death. And his response was, "Well, my mom," because they're both British, by the way, my mom always said that you shouldn't be afraid just because it's just like the way life was before you were born. Okay. And that's highly what Lucretius believes. Lucretius believes there is no soul. Once we're dead, we're dead. There's nothing else for us to worry about and all that sort of stuff, and is what it is. All right. And so, I said, so I brought this introduction up, and then I said, okay, this has brought me to ask a series of questions. And the primary one, more fundamental than what's the nature of death or unbecoming, is what is the nature of being. So again, I've done sort of a transitory thing where I've taken an example to wake the professor up, and then done this transition to get it to the topic that I want to talk about, which is the understanding of existence. Again, how does the nature of existence relate to the nature of death? Well, theoretically, once we cease to exist, that's death. Okay, so there's a relation there, but you got to bring the person there. Okay, and this was actually kind of a stretch in my opinion. I've had better introduction transitions that tended to work a little bit smoother, but that's neither here nor there. Okay, and then I said, so it's brought me to ask a series of questions, more fundamental than nature of death or unbecoming. What's the nature of being? In further readings, I was intrigued to spend more time looking at how this was addressed to pre-Socratics, through the Socratics, to and beyond to Lucretius. Questions like this are addressed in the study of ontology, which is the philosophy of being. And again, I have a citation here. Now, you'll notice with this citation, this is a paraphrase. How do I know that? 2 reasons. Number 1, there's no quotation marks. Number 2, there's no page number. Okay. So if you don't use quotation marks, if you don't do a direct quote, you don't need a page number. Now you'll notice here, there's no comma. APA requires a comma between these two. Chicago style does not. And since I'm writing this in Chicago style, that's kind of what's ended up happening here. All right. In this paper, I will examine the understanding of ontology for philosophers from the pre-Socratics to Lucretius. First, I will address how the pre-Socratics prior to Heraclitus saw the physical world and sought to better understand it. Second, I will examine how the Socratics and their understanding of nature of things, blah, 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 blah. Before discussing the pre-Socratics, I would like to address one point of liberty. Okay, I'm not going to get into that because I want to get back to the outline first. Okay. So we're talking about this outline, and I've kind of, designed this. This is what I would call my sort of a background / definitions area. Like I said, in my paper here, Heraclitus, who's a philosopher here, was oftentimes seen as a pre-Socratic. But a lot of what Heraclitus came up with was highly influenced Socrates. And so because of what we were talking about here, the nature of ontology, Heraclitus' view on ontology actually influenced Socrates quite a bit. And so I said, look, for the purposes of this discussion, I'm not going to consider Heraclitus a pre-Socratic. I'm going to consider him a Socratic. Okay? And again, I just had to explain it. Now, whether the professor believed it or not, I don't know. I got an A on the assignment, so I assume she did. But again, that's kind of what ended up happening there. So you'll notice here that I said before discussing, in this paper, I will examine blah, 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 blah. This right here is essentially, let's see if I can do this here. I believe I can, where I can do a split. Okay, so I've done a split here, and this is my intro. The top part here is my intro. The bottom part here is my premise. Now, I said the pre-Socratics for Heraclitus saw the world through interaction in their lives. First, I will discuss how the pre-Socratics prior to Heraclitus saw the physical world and saw it better to understand it. Now, you'll notice that's not an exact copy. And the reason was because as I was writing the paper and doing some revisions of the paper, I began to realize that a direct copy is not necessarily a good idea. But again, this ties to this, and I can see that. Okay. Second, I will examine how Heraclitus saw their understanding natures through rational process rather than relying on an experiential interaction with the world. Well, let's take a look at premise number 2. The Socratics and Heraclitus saw the understanding of the nature of things through a rational process rather than relying on their experiential interaction with the world. Word for word. Okay. In the first premise, I had to rewrite things because it didn't smooth out well. And again, when we get done with this paper, as you get done with the outline and you copy and paste and you put it into the paper, there's what I call the smoothing process, and that's where you're going to do stuff like this. And I went in and I actually changed the outline here so that if I ever looked at this again, I'd understand why I did it. All right. Third, I will show how Lucretius saw the universe differently as he saw basic elements as atoms being the building block of the world. Okay. Premise number 3. Lucretius saw the universe differently as he saw basic elements as atoms being the basic building blocks of the physical world. Word for word. Okay. Number 4. I will show that Lucretius was a philosopher who believed that nothing comes from nothing. Premise 4. Lucretius was a philosopher who believed that nothing comes from nothing. Also, when the end comes, it returns to what once was. So that's this part right here. Okay. And in the 5th, I said Firth. Obviously, I changed it before I got there. And by the way, let's talk a little bit about that too. Because I write papers a lot, I actually purchased a Grammarly account. I don't think using Grammarly is a bad idea. And look, I understand starving college student, you don't want to go out and spend a whole bunch of money on stuff. But if you're going to be writing a lot of these papers, it doesn't hurt for you to have a Grammarly account. Now, like I said, I went out and I bought, some level higher, because what would happen is by me taking this paper, dumping it into Grammarly and having it edited, it allowed me to get rid of tons of stupid mistakes that I had done. Again, when I tend to write these things, I tend to write them as I'm thinking about them, not necessarily, with structure and order. And the AI in Grammarly helps out quite a bit. So I would actually recommend that. It more likely than not caught that and fixed it. And obviously it must have, because the paper didn't have any problems. In the 5th and final section, I will discuss similarities and differences Lucretius had with pre-Socratics and different philosophers. This was where I was kind of doing a synthesization. What were the differences that each of these 3 groups had? And that's where I'm kind of like, these are the differences they got. Okay. And that's how, and again, premise, Lucretius had some similarities with other philosophers and then had some differences. As I was doing more and more, and again, this is where I was sharing with you that, hey, there may be some times where you have a multiple layers of support that just gets to be too big to put into one paragraph, you need to consider breaking it up. And here I was talking about in this fifth premise, I will discuss similarities and differences that they had. All right. Well, it got too big and I said, okay, well, I'm going to have one paragraph that talks about similarities and I'm going to have another paragraph that talks about the differences. Okay. That's easy to solve. And again, you kind of need to keep that into care. Now, you also remember I told you need 3 levels of support, but you'll notice here, this support's pretty darn big. And in fact, I could have taken this and labeled this as another area of support. But again, when you get to this size, again, I would probably call that 2 levels of support. But again, I'm not worried about the paragraph being too small. I'm trying to think. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 sentences there. And one of these sentences, after death, this sentence is actually a pretty long one. All right. So I'm not worried about this paragraph looking too small or not having enough meat into it. But that, like I said, I went ahead and broke it off into differences. And then I get here to this thing where it said, in conclusion, this paper examined what is the nature of ontology from pre-Socratics through Lucretius. Again, what was my theme? What's the understanding of ontology for philosophers? And again, like I said, you're going to have some of this where again, we're going to copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste, and then we're going to smooth it. Okay. That's what you want to be able to do. Okay. Second, so first I address how the pre-Socratics and prior to Heraclitus saw the physical world through there and sought better to understand it. Okay. So again, getting to this wordsmith version, pre-Socratics saw the world through the interaction of their lives. Again, the way that I wrote it in here and generally the way that I've done conclusion paragraphs in the past, I'll just take this part here, copy, paste, and change the tense. You do that and you're 90% there. So again, a technique, not necessarily procedure, but a technique is taking this intro paragraph, copying, bringing it to the conclusion, pasting, and that's going to get you 90% of the way there. Okay. Third, okay, okay, so once I get here, then I discuss the similarities and differences that Lucretius had. Okay, so this part here is really my re-examination of the intro paragraph and the paper. Again, what did I tell you? So tell them what you're going to tell me, and then tell me what you told me. This is tell me what I told you. Okay. Then here, this is my snappy conclusion. What is the nature of existence and how do we die? Whoops. And how do we die? I'm not sure I will know until I experience it myself. There are many stories where I will come to continue, how we continue on after this life, and some say it will come to an end. Agents Simmons and Fitz address their potential and end. Spoiler alert, they survived, which is true, they did survive. You can't kill two the most popular kids that way and get away with it. And in a way that allowed them to come to the end of their lives with a possible answer that reduced their fear. I suppose Socrates was doing a lot of that as Plato addressed this in the Apology, and in my case, a search for more knowledge and understanding of ontology will have to continue. That's it. Now, how did that work out? Again, here's the final paper. Now, you're going to notice the cover page for this for Chicago and for APA is very similar, incredibly similar. And I'll show you where you can go to get a good APA citation for all this sort of stuff and how that worked out. Now, for us, because there was the teacher wanted to use a feature that's in Blackboard that allows them to do what's called anonymous grading. We couldn't put our names or our G numbers on here. I don't do anonymous grading. I want to do, no offense, folks. I probably won't know you when I'm very horrible with names to faces. Okay, I'm very horrible with names to faces, unless I know you from a previous class. Okay, so again, well, I'll do the best that I can with what I've got, but I wouldn't worry too much about that. All right, so this is how it is. As I was reading the book by Lucretius on the nature of the universe, again, I copied and pasted this into here. And then I got done and I began to realize that paragraph was really long. So I broke it out. So, okay, so I've shrunk each one to 70 pages. Now you'll notice in the final paper, everything is Times New Roman, 12 point, blah, blah, blah. That's what you're going to do for your paper. And I don't care if it's Chicago or APA style. That's both. I'm saying that. And that's usually how it's been done for me. So even though I did this in the whatever the font is for Word, that doesn't mean that when I transfer it over, I'm not going to change the font. And you have to. This font needs to be 12 point Roman Times New Roman. Okay. 12 point Times New Roman. Okay. Now we get here. Essentially what I did is I copied this paragraph over to here. And you'll notice that once we get to this part here, this 10.37, this paragraph right here, for the most part, is a direct copy of this paragraph. So I moved it over. This is a transitory sentence. All right. This is a transitory sentence to get them from here to here. All right. And then in reflecting on death, one also reflects on life. How do we come into existence? How do we come into the being? Blah, 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 so on and so forth. And so this is where I kind of smith this out. Like I said, when I was doing the smoothing process, that allowed me to do this. Again, folks, there's a difference between just going on and just starting to write a paper and write. And then hopefully when you get done, the paper's, pencil's on fire and your paper looks beautiful. Whoops. Take that again. And your paper looks beautiful. Okay. Again, when you do that, it doesn't flow very well always. But this way, what happens is tweaking a paper is much different than the process of just creating from scratch. And so by tweaking the paper, you can get your creativities. And again, there's a lot of people who are out there that are like, yeah, but I'm more creative than this. I want to be more creative. I want freedom. I want the ability to expand. Okay, you'll have that ability once you're getting into the smoothing stage. Okay. And so, they say here, and then again, in this paper, I will examine blah, 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 blah. This is pretty much word for word here. Okay. Where I say in this paper, I will examine the understanding of, and I changed it from ontology to metaphysics. That's because, metaphysics is really what Socrates and the pre-Socratics were really dealing with. It would later, metaphysics is sort of seen as an area of ontology. And so, again, and again, when you're doing the smoothing part of this, that's where you start to reflect upon this and say, do I really want to use this word? Do I really want to use this process? Do I want to say this? Does this make sense? Does this do what I'm looking for? And again, if you're just trying to write, you're not doing that. You're just trying to get words on your head onto paper. And again, by doing the outline, you're already doing that. But you're also doing it in a way that allows you to still change and move things around and put everything up. That's why I think the outlining of this is better than anything else. All right. So like I said, word for word. Okay, so before discussing the pre-Socratics, I'd like to address one point of liberty I've taken, which is the addition of Heraclitus into the category out of pre-Socratics into Socratics. So I did that. And then we kind of did this and eventually, like I said, when I copied and pasted this over, I broke this out into 3 sections. And part of the reason why I did that, I actually did it because it was part of the assignment. So part of the assignment was actually to incorporate 3 different papers. But the assignment was developed before our professor took over the class. And the professor who took over the class said, I don't have time to design a new class. I'm just going to do what the last professor wanted to do. And we'll get that done. And what ended up happening is, she basically was like, I'm not really thrilled with this assignment. So she said, look, just create separate sections. And so that's one reason why we did this as a separate section. So we ended up doing this here where we brought this out. Now you'll notice this quote here that was brought by. Okay. There's two things that you got to notice about this. Number one, there's no quotations. Why is that? If your quote is going to be more than 3 lines, if your quote is going to be more than 3 lines, solid, you need to break it out into a what we call a subparagraph. Okay? So again, I'm quoting a whole chunk of material. And instead of saying quote to quote, where I've got to do multiple quotes, especially because I'm doing, in this case, I'm doing multiple sentences. Especially if you're doing multiple sentences, you need to break it out into its own paragraph. And this is what we call it a subparagraph. Now, because I broke it out in a subparagraph, and by the way, this is one area of the paper, there is no double spacing. So you don't do any double spacing. And then you have just the citation at the end. Again, McCarahan, 2010, page 27. Now, something that you need to understand about this assignment that was given to me, we were under a significant restriction as to how much material we could cite outside of specified material. So we had our textbook, we had a couple articles that we had read in class, we had a couple other things that we read in class. I could cite those items freely. Anything outside of that, because this was supposed to be a reflection paper on what we read, not so much a big topic. Okay, and so that's kind of what I want you to understand there. All right, and you'll notice here something else that should be interesting. Almost every single sentence that I wrote has a citation. Okay, again, 80% of your paper should not be original thought. It should come from somebody else that's smarter than we are. Okay. Okay, and while the boundless is not necessarily an element that Anaximander was looking for, I'm like having senior moments here. It was the opposite of the elements which he was interacting. Again, earth, fire, air, and water. The infinite, a perion body, cannot be one which is simple, nor can it be some to say, blah, blah, so on and so forth. So I pulled that quote, again, from my list of quotes. Again, when you're building your paper at this point, it's copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste, smooth. Okay? I need to come up with a way to do that. Should be like a TikTok video type thing, right? Copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste, and smooth. Okay? By the way, I do not give anyone any permission to take that snippet and put it on TikTok. If you put anything on me on TikTok, I don't give permission to do that. Okay. I don't want to be a TikTok star, by God. I mean, I don't have any hair, so obviously I'll never be a star there, but that's all right. But the fact of the matter is that, like I said, copy, paste, and then we're going to smooth it. All right. And when I say smooth it, usually what I do, I just copy, paste everything over into one big paper. And then I start the smoothing process. Okay. And that's kind of how I end up doing this. And that's what I did here. But again, there are a lot of times where we have these large quotes. We're going to bracket these out into their own sub paragraphs. Okay. Then you have Lucretius, which is the view of metaphysics. And this is the Lucretius area where we kind of brought a lot of that stuff out. And Lucretius had some different. Now, here's the other thing that I'll let you know. As you are smoothing your paragraph, your paper, and you begin to realize that you're smoothing it out, and you're kind of like, I thought this had a lot of oomph to it, but it doesn't. So I'm going to add another quote. Or I'm going to add another citation. I'm going to add another part from this one paper that I saw. Because as you're doing a reviewing of this, and again, if you've ever done any accounting work, you know how this is done. Reviewing work is much different than doing work. Doing work, you're so busy doing, you're not necessarily thinking of the big picture. The review process of this, which is what you're doing with the smoothing, you are actually examining what the your brain is going to be kind of thinking here to yourself. Does this really fit what I'm asking myself to do? Okay, and so that's going to be very helpful for you. And again, kind of smoothing things out. Again, when I got done with this paper, the professor said it was one of the best papers that she had read in the class. So, you know, all that sort of stuff. So we get to Lucretia's conclusion. Again, in conclusion, blah, blah, blah. And again, what I did here is I just pretty much copied, pasted, moved over. You know, in fact, if you read this word for word, it's going to be word for word. All right. And then you've got your works cited page. Now, again, with this paper, I was required to only stick to a certain number of texts. In my class, usually I want you to do the text that I issued out, but I also want you to go out and see if there's a way to find some other text. And the best way to do that is to grab the works cited of the articles that we're reading in class and see what they're saying. And you can pull some of those articles and read them and say, does this all make sense to me? Okay. And all that sort of stuff. All right. So that's kind of where we're at with that. Let's go ahead and we're going to kick it over to Owl Purdue, and then we can kind of go to the next stage. All right, everybody. So this is good Google. Do the black screen so it's not going to be as bright as it would be for you. But so we got Google here, and basically what we do here is that you're gonna pull this stuff up. How long to boil eggs? I don't know who that was. That definitely wasn't me. Let's see. So we're going to do Owl Purdue APA. Now, if you're going to do, say, for example, you're looking for a different type. Chicago. Okay, I can spell Chicago. All right, so you could do Chicago. All right, and again, Owl Purdue has got a lot of really good stuff here. All right, so we go here, and again, you go to purdueowl.edu, and this is your APA instruction. All right, now if you're having a hard time remembering how to do a citation for something, yeah, I'll let them know. I don't care. All right, you can have, you know, this right here, this citation machine that they do, they'll help you with that stuff. Now something that I'll let you know on about this, it's not owned by Owl Purdue. I think it's like a third-party person who actually does some advertising. So if you want to get a citation, sometimes they may make you watch an advertisement. You're getting something for free, folks. Just go ahead and do it. Okay. And so they have here. This is your Purdue Owl page. Yeah, and sometimes you get these stupid ads that keep coming up, which drive me nuts and all that sort of stuff. Okay, so I'm trying to see here. Overview and workshop. Okay. APA style guide 7th. Okay, so you want to get to this APA. You want to get to this APA file formatting guide. You got the general, you got the in-text citations, basic formats, blah, 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 so on and so forth. Probably the most valuable thing here, at least they used to have it. Let's see. Yeah, they do. Sample paper. All right. So this is a sample paper that they put on their stuff. And again, this is Department of English. You know it's got to be right? At least I would hope so. And they put and the thing I really like about this, they put comments as to what needs to happen here. Now they've got it where the top of the page, blah blah. They may ask for a running title. Okay, we'll talk about running heads here in a little bit. To be honest, I don't recall that they have to be bolded. They're saying that it's bolded here, so maybe that was a change in one of the recent updates that I was not aware of. That's neither here nor there. And again, you're going to have the name of the author, the department that you are, your course, my name, and then the date. Okay. They don't actually put running heads here, so I'm not going to make you guys do running heads. Don't worry about that. But again, so like I said, this is where they're going to have the various different types of citations, and use this to help yourself out, especially if you're not used to writing academic papers. Okay. This is incredibly helpful. And there's been a few times where I'm kind of like writing a paper and I'm like, I can't remember what APA requires us on this and blah, blah. Purdue Owl helps you out a lot. Now, there's going to be a lot of things that they also have here. If you've got an electronic source, an audiovisual media. I remember when I was trying to cite that television show and a couple movies that I was doing, I didn't know how to do it. And so I said, well, how do I do it? And so I come here and I looked it up. They also talk about how to cite books. Okay. And you can come here, cite a book. They'll give you the citation on that. Okay. And all that. And then they'll give you kind of some examples. And if you're willing to do this on your own without having to do crazy things here, that's possible that you can write this on your own. Again, if you're only doing like 5 to 7 citations, not a problem. When I wrote my dissertation, there had to be at least 100. I can't manage that. Now I have access to another group, which is called, and I have access to RefWorks at GWU still. This RefWorks though is a RefWorks is, and again, if you ever decide that you want to get into academic work, might not be a bad idea to have one of these, because what it does is it allows you to here, let's see if I can get in and I can show you what I do with this. Now with RefWorks, one of the things that I really like about this is that you can have different folders, where I have, when I was doing my dissertation, I had my dissertation stuff. I had where I was doing a paper on heuristics. I had another paper I was doing on CSR, which is corporate social responsibility, and social capital. I had another paper I was doing on Burrell and Morgan, and annotated bibliography assignments and all that stuff. So you can create different folders for different assignments as you're kind of doing this. And again, if you want to take a look at all the stuff that I have, all references, this is pretty much it. And by the way, you see here, 1,700 references that I had to keep track of for all my entire time. So again, and look, I'm not asking you to do this for this class. I'm not asking you to do it for any of my classes. But if you decide that you want to get into academic work, you might want to have one of these. Because if you don't, you're going to go nuts. Okay, you're going to go absolutely stark raving mad. So you want to make sure that you're kind of keeping up on that in order to help that out. You don't have to do this, but if you're just sitting there saying, look, I want to get to my works cited. This is an appendix. So again, and when you get to your reference, whether you call it references or works cited, I don't care. I don't think most professors care either. But again, when you're trying to figure out how to structure these, sometimes it's easier to just take something, dump it in, and say, here it is, tell me what the citation is, and move on. All right. Yeah. And so you want to make sure that you get that stuff taken care of there. Okay. So that's pretty much it as far as like a sample APA paper. Now, like I said, I don't expect you to use RefWorks, but if you're going to get into academia, you might want to find a tool that allows you to do that, so that especially if you're going to write your dissertation, mine, like I said, had well over 100 citations in it, just because of the fact that we were doing so much with it. Okay. All right, folks. So that's pretty much about it. Now I know this video went really long, but I've had a lot of students who've asked me in the past, can you help me by having this? And I wanted to make sure that you guys had a copy of this so that you could watch it on your own, because I know everybody's got their own, time frames that they've got, and time schedules, and sometimes sitting in class and going over this is very difficult. I hope you found this useful, and I hope that you enjoyed it. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Look, I want to help you become better at this. And by the way, when you get done with your first paper, I'll try to give you as much feedback as I can. Sometimes, especially if it's really bad, I might just say, hey, did you really watch this video? And if you come back to me and say, yes, I did, then I'm going to be like, okay, you need to schedule some time with me. All right. We just don't have enough time to go over all that stuff. I would say that since I've come to George Mason, I've never had to have that incident with a student. Okay. But I want you guys to get better at this stuff, because as you go forward and as you begin to write more and more, you need to be able to, have those good paper writing skills so that you can impress upon your instructors that you actually know what you're doing. And again, I'm not the only class that does this. I know you're going to be writing a couple of these papers in 781 if you take data analytics, track, which is going to be tax analytics, which I teach. I know some other teachers are going to be asking you to write papers also, okay, about various topics. Again, we're trying to bring you to that level so that you are successful, and you need to help us help you by effectively learning how to communicate. I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, if you're one of my students, you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. You can email me at your leisure. If you're not one of my students, I would ask that you go ahead and hit like and subscribe, and so that we can get the analytics going on this. And I want to say thank you very much for watching this video, and I look forward to seeing you guys later.